something profoundly interesting about seeds. Not the poetic version we always hear about, but the actual biological reality of what happens beneath the soil. A seed doesn't announce itself. It doesn't send out notifications. It doesn't create a social media page saying, day one of my transformation. It simply breaks apart in the darkness, in the silence, in the secrecy of the earth. And that breaking, that dying to what it was, is the very thing that births what is meant to become. I was talking to a farmer once, not a casual conversation, but a deep one. He told me something that revolutionized my entire perspective on personal development. He said the seed that makes the most noise is the one the birds find first. Think about that. The seed that cannot stay hidden, that somehow reveals itself too early, becomes food for predators. It never fulfills its purpose. It never becomes a tree. It never produces fruit. It gets consumed in its premature exposure. And I began to realize that we live in a generation obsessed with documentation, obsessed with announcement, obsessed with applause at every stage of the journey. We want people to see us learning. We want people to celebrate us changing. We want recognition for our discipline, admiration for our sacrifices, and validation for our progress. But here's the truth that most people will never accept. The season of your building is not meant to be a public exhibition. Your transformation is not entertainment. Your process is not content. There was a young man I encountered several years ago, brilliant mind, exceptional potential. He had decided to make a change in his life financially, spiritually, intellectually, physically, everything. And I watched him do something that I've seen destroy countless destinies. He announced everything. Every book he started reading, he posted about it. Every morning he woke up early, he had to tell someone. Every meal plan, every workout, every small victory announced, celebrated, applauded. And you know what happened? Within 3 months, he was back to his old patterns. Completely. I asked him later what happened. And his answer was revealing. He said, I don't know. I just lost the momentum. It's like the excitement disappeared, but I knew what happened. He had spent all his energy on the announcement instead of the accomplishment. He had received all his rewards in the form of likes, comments, and compliments, and his soul became satisfied with the appearance of change rather than hungry for the reality of transformation. See, there's a spiritual principle here that many people don't understand. When you build in secret, when you transform in silence, when you develop in the hidden place, you are accumulating something. You're building up substance. You're creating depth. You're establishing roots. But when you constantly expose your process, when you're always performing your progress, you're releasing that energy. You're dissipating that power. You're trading the substance for the shadow. I remember reading about a master sculptor, and this story changed my life. He was commissioned to create a statue for a public square, a massive piece that would define the city's landscape. Everyone wanted to see his process. The media wanted to document it. People wanted to visit his workshop, but he refused them all. He locked himself away. For 18 months, nobody saw what he was doing. People began to mock him. They questioned whether he was even working. Some said he had taken the money and fled. Others said he didn't have the skill to complete the project. The criticism was relentless. But when those 18 months ended and he unveiled that sculpture, the entire city was silenced. Not just silenced, they were overwhelmed. What he had created was beyond what anyone had imagined. It wasn't just a sculpture. It was a masterpiece that would stand for generations. And in an interview later, someone asked him, why didn't you let us see your process? Why all the secrecy? His answer was profound. He said, because if I had let you watch me make mistakes, if I had let you see me fail and restart, if I had let you witness my uncertainty, your opinions would have entered my creative space. Your doubts would have become my doubts. Your limitations would have influenced my vision. I needed to protect what I was building until it was strong enough to stand on its own. That's the first principle of building yourself silently. Protect your vision from the pollution of premature exposure. Your dreams are fragile in their early stages. Your new habits are vulnerable when they are just forming. Your transformation is delicate when it's just beginning. Not everyone deserves access to your becoming. Not everyone has earned the right to witness your process. And certainly not everyone has the spiritual capacity to support what God is doing in your life without contaminating it with their own limitations, fears, and unbelief. I want you to understand something that's going to challenge you. Silence is not weakness. Secrecy is not insecurity. Privacy is not pride. There's a difference between being secretive because you are ashamed and being private because you are wise. There's a difference between hiding because you are afraid and being discreet because you understand the power of timing. You don't owe everyone an explanation of what you're doing, where you're going, or how you're changing. Your transformation is between you and your purpose, between you and your destiny, between you and the divine. Now, let me take you deeper. There was a man who lived in ancient times, skilled in his craft, known for his ability to create weapons of war. His name was becoming renowned, and kings from various regions would send for him, wanting to witness his technique, wanting to learn his secrets. But this man understood something about mastery that most people never grasp. He knew that the moment you reveal your methods before you've perfected them, you give your competitors the advantage. He knew that showing your strategy before executing it gives your enemies time to prepare. So he did something brilliant. He would work at night. While everyone else was sleeping, while the world was resting, he would be in his workshop perfecting his craft, testing, failing, adjusting, improving. And when the sun would rise, he would conduct his regular business as if nothing special was happening. Years passed like this. People thought they knew him. They thought they understood his capacity. But they had no idea what he was becoming in the secret place. Then came the day when a great war threatened his nation. The king called for the best weapon makers in the land. Everyone came with their offerings, good weapons, strong weapons, weapons that had been proven in previous battles. But when this man presented what he had created in those secret years, in those hidden nights of diligent work, everyone was astonished. He had developed a weapon unlike anything anyone had ever seen. A weapon that changed the course of that war. A weapon that secured victory for his people. And here's what struck me about this story when I first heard it. Nobody knew he had that capacity because he never announced he was developing it. He didn't form a committee to discuss it. He didn't create a focus group to validate it. He didn't post his progress online. He simply stayed faithful to his secret place of development. And when the moment of opportunity arrived, he was ready. Not because he was lucky. Not because he was more talented than others. But because he had built himself silently while others were busy performing their potential rather than actualizing it. This leads me to something I need you to hear very carefully. Your silence during your building season is actually a form of spiritual warfare. Every time you resist the urge to announce what you're doing, you're winning a battle against pride. Every time you choose to keep your progress private, you're defeating the spirit of premature celebration. Every time you build without broadcasting, you're developing a strength that cannot be developed any other way. The strength of self-validation. See, when you need people to see what you're doing in order to keep doing it, you've made your discipline dependent on external validation. You've made your consistency contingent on applause. But when you can wake up at 4 in the morning and no one knows it, when you can study for hours and no one acknowledges it, when you can sacrifice and serve and grow and develop and nobody's watching, nobody's clapping, nobody's even aware, and you keep doing it anyway, you've accessed a level of strength that most people will never experience. There's a story I heard about a young woman who decided she was going to learn a new language. She had always been intimidated by it, always felt it was beyond her capacity, but something shifted in her spirit and she decided she was going to do it. Now, here's what makes this story powerful. She told absolutely no one, not her family, not her friends, not her colleagues. She simply began. Every morning, before anyone else in her house was awake, she would study 30 minutes, then an hour, then 2 hours. She would listen to lessons while cooking. She would practice while commuting. She would immerse herself in this language in complete secrecy. 2 years passed. 2 full years of silent, consistent, dedicated work. And then came the moment her company was expanding into a new region and they needed someone who could speak this particular language. It was a rare language, not commonly spoken, and they were willing to promote and compensate significantly for someone with this skill. The entire department was discussing how they probably have to hire someone from outside the company. And that's when she simply said, I can speak it fluently. The room went silent. Nobody believed her. They tested her and she demonstrated a level of fluency that shocked everyone who knew her. Within a week, she received the promotion. Within a month, she was leading an entire division. Within a year, her income had tripled. But here's what moved me about her story. When she told it to me years later, she said, if I had announced I was learning it, people would have discouraged me. They would have told me it was too hard. They would have reminded me of my previous failures. They would have watched me make mistakes and use those mistakes to confirm their doubt. But because I built in silence, by the time they found out, I was already fluent. I was already undeniable. I was already qualified. Do you see the wisdom in this? When you build yourself silently, you remove the opportunity for small-minded people to interfere with large-scale destiny. You eliminate the possibility of dream killers speaking death into your vision while it's still in its embryonic stage. You protect your future from the limitations of people who can't see beyond their own ceiling. But let me give you the other side of this, because balance is important. Building silently doesn't mean building alone. It doesn't mean you can't have mentors, advisors, coaches, or counselors. It doesn't mean you reject all input or isolate yourself completely. What it means is that you become highly selective about who has access to your process. You become intentional about who you are allowed to speak into your development. You become protective of your mental and spiritual space. There's a difference between accountability and announcement. Accountability is when you have 2 or 3 people who are qualified to guide you. People who have your best interest at heart. People who have the wisdom to correct you and the grace to encourage you. Announcement is when you are telling everyone, seeking validation from crowds, looking for applause from people who have no investment in your success and no authority to guide your path. I know a man who decided to completely restructure his life. He was living beneath his potential and he knew it. He had become comfortable with mediocrity and something in his spirit said enough. So he made a decision. He was going to build himself financially, intellectually, physically, spiritually. Everything was going to change. But he was wise. He didn't announce it to his entire social circle. Instead, he identified 3 people, one who had achieved what he wanted to achieve financially, one who had the spiritual depth he was seeking, and one who had the discipline and physical health he admired. He approached these 3 people privately, shared his vision, and asked if they would hold him accountable. For the next 3 years, he met with these 3 people regularly. He reported his progress, received their guidance, admitted his failures, celebrated his victories, but to everyone else he was silent. His co-workers didn't know he was studying for a certification. His friends didn't know he had eliminated certain habits. His extended family didn't know he was saving aggressively and investing wisely. He just quietly, consistently, persistently built himself, and then seemingly overnight, though it was actually 3 years of invisible work, everything in his life shifted. He got the promotion. He launched the business. He bought the property. He achieved the goals. And people were shocked. They said things like, how did this happen so fast? Where did this come from? This is so sudden. But it wasn't sudden at all. It was the manifestation of silent construction. It was the harvest of seeds planted in secret. It was the reward of refusing to perform his process for public consumption. Here's what I need you to lock into your consciousness. Everything significant that has ever happened in history was built in secret before it was revealed in public. Every great building started with an architect alone with a blank page. Every powerful movement started with one person and a revolutionary idea that nobody else could see. Every world-changing invention started in someone's private space of experimentation. The public only sees the unveiling. They only witness the manifestation. They only experience the result. But the real work, the significant work, the transformative work that always happens in the hidden place. And this is why building silently is not just a strategy, it's a spiritual discipline. It's training yourself to find satisfaction in the work itself rather than in the recognition for the work. It's learning to be motivated by progress rather than by praise. It's developing the capacity to keep building even when nobody's watching, nobody's celebrating, nobody even knows what you're doing. Let me tell you about a teacher I once knew. He taught in a small school, nothing prestigious, nothing that would impress anyone. But this man had a vision. He believed that education could transform communities, that teaching was a sacred assignment, that every child he encountered was a destiny waiting to be awakened. So he made a decision. He was going to become the best teacher he could possibly be. Not for awards, not for recognition, but because he believed in the sacredness of his calling. So he started studying educational psychology, child development, pedagogy, neuroscience. He would spend his evenings reading, researching, learning. He would invest his weekends observing master teachers, attending workshops, developing his craft. He never announced this to anyone. He never posted about the books he was reading or the conferences he was attending. He just quietly, consistently, relentlessly pursued excellence in his field. Years passed, 5 years, 7 years, 10 years. And something remarkable began to happen. Students who had been written off by everyone else would enter his classroom and transform. Children who were considered unteachable would suddenly excel. Young people who had been labeled as problematic would discover their purpose. And word began to spread. Not because he marketed himself, not because he promoted his achievements, but because the results were undeniable. Educational institutions from around the region began to take notice. They wanted to understand his methodology. They wanted to learn his techniques. They offered him positions with significantly higher salaries, better facilities, more resources. But here's what moved me about his response. He said, I wasn't building myself to escape where I am. I was building myself to transform where I am. He stayed in that small school and turned it into a model of educational excellence that educators would travel to observe. And when someone asked him years later, why didn't you tell people what you were doing? Why didn't you document your journey? His answer was profound. He said, because if I had been focused on telling my own power story, I wouldn't have had time to build my capacity. If I had been concerned with getting credit, I would have missed the opportunity to create impact. I wasn't building a reputation. I was building a reality. That statement right there. I wasn't building a reputation. I was building a reality. That's the distinction most people never make. They spend all their energy managing perception instead of mastering their craft. They're so concerned about what people think they are becoming that they never actually become it. They are so busy curating an image of transformation that they never experience actual transformation. Let me take you somewhere else. There's a community I visited once, a place where they practice an ancient form of pottery. Not the kind you see in tourist shops, but the kind that takes years to master. The kind where each piece is a work of art. I met an elderly porter there, a woman who had been working with clay for over 50 years. Her hands were weathered, marked by decades of shaping earth into beauty. And I asked her something that had been on my mind. How long does it take to become a master potter? She smiled, and her answer wasn't what I expected. She said, the clay will tell you when you're ready, not the people. Then she explained something that revolutionized my understanding of mastery. She said that in their tradition, when someone decides to learn pottery, they work in complete isolation for the first 7 years. 7 years. They don't sell their pieces. They don't display their work. They don't even allow visitors to watch them. They simply work with the clay day after day, making thousands of pieces, most of which they destroy themselves because they don't meet the standard. But why? I asked, why destroy work that might be good enough for others? Her response was piercing. Because if you let people celebrate your mediocrity, you'll never pursue your mastery. If you receive praise for being average, you'll stop. Reaching for excellence. The silence protects your standards. For 7 years, these apprentice potters work in secret and nobody knows their progress. Nobody sees their improvement. Nobody validates their effort. And here's what happens. Most people quit within the first 2 years. They can't handle the silence. They can't endure the lack of recognition. They can't sustain the discipline without applause. But those who persist, those who can find satisfaction in the relationship between their hands and the clay, those who can remain faithful to the process without an audience they emerge as masters, when their 7 years are complete, they present one piece, just one, to the community of master potters. And if that piece demonstrates true mastery, they are welcomed into the guild. They are given access to the best clay, the finest tools, the most prestigious opportunities. But if the piece doesn't demonstrate mastery, they're told to return to their isolation and continue. Building. No shame. No judgment. Just the understanding that mastery cannot be rushed and true excellence cannot be performed into existence. I left that village thinking about how many people abandon their purpose because they can't endure the building season. They start strong, they have genuine intention, but when weeks turn into months and months turn into years and nobody is applauding, nobody is noticing, nobody is celebrating, they quit. They convince themselves it's not worth it. They tell themselves that if it were meant to be, it would be easier, it would be faster, it will come with more immediate recognition. But that's not how greatness works. That's not how transformation occurs. That's not how you build something that lasts. Everything that endures, everything that matters, everything that creates lasting impact is built slowly, quietly, persistently, in the place where nobody is watching. Now, let me tell you about a musician I encountered. This was someone who had dreamed of creating music since childhood, but life had taken him in a different direction. He had a regular job, responsibilities, bills to pay, but that dream never died. It stayed with him, whispered to him, called to him. So at the age of 37, he made a decision. He was going to learn to produce music, not as a hobby, not casually, but with the intention of mastery. Here's what makes his story different. He didn't quit his job. He didn't make a dramatic announcement on social media. He didn't start a YouTube channel documenting his journey. He simply rearranged his life. He would wake up at 4:30 every morning and spend 3 hours learning production techniques, studying music theory, practicing his craft. Every single morning, before his family woke up, before his workday began, in complete silence. His co-workers had no idea. His extended family didn't know. Even his close friends weren't aware of what he was building. He would go to work, perform his duties excellently, come home to his family, fulfill his responsibilities, and then after everyone was asleep, he would spend another 2 hours working on his craft. 5 hours a day, every day, for 4 years. 4 years of this. Can you imagine? 4 years of sacrificing sleep, of disciplining yourself, of staying committed to something that nobody was acknowledging, nobody was celebrating, nobody even knew existed. And here's what's profound. During those 4 years, he released nothing. He created dozens of projects, hundreds of pieces, but he released nothing publicly. He was building his skill, developing his sound, finding his voice. Then, in year 5, he released his first project. Not with a massive marketing campaign, not with a publicity blitz, just a quiet release, and something extraordinary happened. The music community took notice, not because of hype, not because of promotion, but because the quality was undeniable. Within 6 months, established artists were reaching out to him. Within a year, he had production credits on projects that were charting internationally. Within 2 years, he had left his regular job and was doing what he loved full-time, earning more than he had ever imagined possible. But here's what he told me that shook me. If I had announced what I was doing in year 1, people would have judged my year 1 quality and dismissed me. If I had released my year 2 work, people would have said I was okay, but nothing special. But because I built in silence for 4 years, when I finally emerged, I emerged undeniable. I didn't have to convince anyone of my value. The work spoke for itself. Do you understand the power in this? When you build yourself silently, you control the narrative of your emergence. You don't give people the opportunity to judge your process. You don't allow them to define you by your beginning stages. You don't let them limit you based on your learning curve. You show up already transformed, already skilled, already prepared. There's another dimension to this that I need to address, because some people misunderstand what building silently means. Some people think it means being passive, being invisible, being irrelevant. That's not it at all. Building silently doesn't mean you're not active in your current position. It doesn't mean you withdraw from your responsibilities. It doesn't mean you become a hermit. Building silently means you're faithful in your public duties while you're developing your private capacity. You're excellent in your visible assignments while you're preparing for your invisible promotion. You're committed to your current season while you're constructing your next level. I know a woman who worked as an administrative assistant in a corporate office. She was exceptional at her job, organized, efficient, reliable. Everyone appreciated her work, but nobody knew what she was building in secret. Every lunch break, instead of socializing in the cafeteria, she would go to her car and take online courses in data analysis every evening. After her children went to bed, she would practice with data sets, learn new software, develop skills that nobody in her office had any idea she possessed. She did this for 3 years. 3 years of lunch breaks in her car. 3 years of late nights after her family was asleep. 3 years of investing in herself when she could have been relaxing, socializing, entertaining herself. And nobody knew. Her colleagues thought she was just a great administrative assistant. Her supervisor had no idea she was becoming a data analyst. Her company didn't realize they had someone with emerging expertise right under their nose. Then the company decided to expand their analytics department. They needed someone who could bridge the gap between the technical team and the business operations team. They were preparing to spend months recruiting, interviewing, training someone from outside. And that's when she walked into her supervisor's office and said, I can do this. She presented her certifications, demonstrated her skills, showed them projects she had completed independently. Within 2 weeks, she was promoted into a role that tripled her salary and put her on a completely different career trajectory. Her colleagues were stunned. How did you learn all this? When did this happen? Why didn't you tell anyone? And her response was simple. I was building the bridge before I needed to cross it. I was preparing for the opportunity before it arrived. I was becoming qualified in secret so I could be ready in public. This is the principle. Preparation in private creates confidence in public. When you've built yourself in secret, when you've developed your capacity without announcement, when you've invested in your growth without applause, you show up to opportunities with a level of readiness that others simply don't have. You're not hoping to figure it out. You're not trying to fake it until you make it. You already done the work. You've already paid the price. You've already earned the capacity. Let me give you one more story. And this one is going to challenge everything you think about timing. There was a man who worked in construction, physical labor, hard work. He had dropped out of school young, had to work to support his family, never had the opportunity for formal education. But this man had a brilliant mind. He would read everything he could get. His hands on philosophy, science, history, literature. While his co-workers would spend their lunch breaks talking and joking, he would be reading. While others would go straight home after work, he would stop at the library for an hour. This went on for 12 years. 12 years of reading during breaks, studying in libraries, educating himself while doing manual labor. His co-workers would sometimes mock him. Why are you reading all that? You think you're going to become a professor? They didn't understand. They couldn't see what he was building. They didn't recognize that he wasn't reading to impress them. He was reading because he was hungry for knowledge, because he was developing his mind, because he understood that formal education is just one path to wisdom, and he was creating his own path. Then something happened that changed his entire trajectory. The construction company was working on a major project, and they had an issue, a complex engineering problem that the educated engineers couldn't solve. They were weeks behind schedule, losing money every day. The tension was high, and one day during a lunch break, this laborer was reading a book on structural engineering. One of the supervisors noticed, and more out of frustration than genuine interest, asked him, "You understand any of that?" He looked up and said, "I understand all of it." The supervisor, skeptical but desperate, explained the problem they were facing, and this laborer, this man who had been building himself silently for 12 years, solved it right there. During his lunch break, he explained the solution with such clarity, such depth of understanding that the engineers were speechless. Within months, he was moved off the labor crew and into the engineering department. Within 2 years, he was leading projects. Within 5 years, he had started his own firm. And the most powerful part of his story isn't the success, is what he said when someone asked him how he stayed motivated during those 12 years when nobody knew what he was doing. Nobody acknowledged his effort. Nobody validated his journey. He said, "I wasn't building for validation. I was building for transformation. I wasn't studying to prove something to people. I was studying to become someone beyond what people thought was possible. Every book I read wasn't for show. It was for growth. Every hour I spent learning wasn't for applause. It was for advancement." And the beautiful thing about building in secret is that you can't fool yourself. You don't know if you're really doing the work or just performing it. And I did the work. That statement, "you can't fool yourself," that's the ultimate accountability of silent building. When you're building publicly, you can perform. You can post a picture of a book and never read it. You can check in at the gym and not really work out. You can create the appearance of change without actually changing. But when you are building in silence, you face yourself. You know the truth. You can't pretend. You either did it or you didn't. You either grew or you didn't. You either built or you didn't. And this brings me to the final revelation I want to leave with you. The reason building yourself silently is so powerful isn't just because it protects you from negativity, though it does. It's not just because it gives you time to develop without pressure, though it does. It's not just because it allows you to control the narrative of your imaginings, though it does. The real power of building silently is that it changes who you are at your core. When you can stay committed to growth when nobody is watching, you develop internal strength. When you can Remain disciplined without external motivation. You access self-mastery. When you can keep building without applause, you transcend the need for validation. You become someone who is motivated by purpose rather than praise, driven by vision rather than visibility, sustained by conviction rather than congratulations. This is the person who cannot be stopped. This is the person who cannot be discouraged. This is the person who cannot be derailed, because their foundation isn't built on people's opinions. Their momentum isn't dependent on public approval. Their identity isn't shaped by external validation. They know who they are. They know what they are building. They know where they are going. And nothing, not criticism, not mockery, not silence, not delay, nothing can stop them from becoming who they are meant to be. So here's my challenge to you. Stop announcing and start building. Stop performing and start developing. Stop seeking validation and start creating value. Choose one area of your life, one skill, one habit, one discipline, one dream, and build it in complete silence. Not for a week, not for a month, but for as long as it takes to transform from someone who's trying to someone who has arrived. Let people discover your growth. Let your results announce your work. Let your transformation speak louder than your words ever could. And when the time comes, when the opportunity arrives, when the moment presents itself, you won't have to convince anyone of what you've become. Your capacity will be undeniable. Your readiness will be obvious. Your preparation will speak for itself. Build yourself silently, not because you're hiding, not because you are ashamed, but because you understand that the most powerful transformations happen in the secret place. Because you recognize that true excellence requires a protection during its development. Because you know that the seed that grows in the darkness emerges as the tree that provides shade for generations. Your building season is sacred. Protect it. Honor it. Commit to it. And watch what happens when you stop performing your process and start perfecting your craft. Watch what happens when you trade the applause of the crowd for the satisfaction of true mastery. Watch what happens when you build yourself silently, consistently, relentlessly, until the day comes when your emergence is not a surprise to you. It's simply the manifestation of what you've been constructing all along.